More now on our top story, President Obama's deficit-cutting plan. Yesterday, he outlined a proposal to cut deficits by $4 trillion over 12 years. Also asked Congress to come up with an agreement by the end of June. Our next guest says it was a pivotal moment in the presidency. Jim Kessler is with us now. He is the co-founder of the Democratic think tank Third Way. Jim, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Before we get to the political implications of the president's speech yesterday, why did Obama extend the period in which he wants to cut the deficit from 10 years to 12 years? Some say if you use the current CBO baseline, basically it equals $1.65 trillion less than calculating with the 10-year time period.
Look, I think you can nitpick and focus about whether it's 10 years or 12 years, but I think really the big news yesterday is, look, are we getting closer to a budget deal, a bipartisan budget deal that could really be comprehensive, or are we getting further away? And I think what the president did yesterday, and the reason why we thought it was a pivotal moment is, I think the chances of a bipartisan deal that really matters increased dramatically with yesterday's speech. And I think the focus really should be on, we can get closer to a deal. So I think it was a really good moment. Negotiators will decide whether it's 10 years or 12 years or 3.8 trillion or 4.2 trillion. But I think we're now, most players are in the same ballpark right now.
Jim, I hear what you're saying, that the spirit of cooperation is more important than any of the calculations that we can do. But it seems like those 2 years, that change could exceed the baseline projection, and $1.5 trillion isn't negligible, right?
It's not negligible, but what the president did yesterday that was pretty important was he challenged his own liberal base. He put entitlements on the table. He took up really most of what the so-called Bowles-Simpson plan, a bipartisan deficit commission plan, did, and moved dramatically to the center. So now you've got the Senate group, this gang of six, this bipartisan group. You've got Bowles-Simpson and you've got the president, and they're all pretty much in the same ballpark. They're in the same universe. You could see the contours of a deal coming together.
Now, some say there's no way to take back the deficit to this sustainable level of 2 to 3% of GDP. I know the gang of six is sort of the last hope. How likely is it that they're going to be able to come up with something that addresses it, that's more realistic?
It's hard, okay? These are hard numbers to reach. But one of the things also very significant in the president's plan was they have these triggers that if you're not reaching it, you get automatic spending cuts and automatic tax increases. The goals of these triggers are so that no one ever pulls them. So if you have these triggers in a plan, I think the chances of them reaching that 2.8, 2.4% of GDP figure get a lot closer.
Your mission, we know, at the Third Way, or at Third Way, is to present some options that are palatable to the right, to the left, to bring them together. How impossible is your mission right now?
Well, I don't feel that it's impossible. Look, a lot of the changes that need to be made, because our deficit problem is really long-term and structural, you can make modest changes today that have huge impacts, down the road. So, for example, the difference between 10 and 12 years that you talked about in those 2 years is about 1.5 trillion. It shows that if you do relatively modest, doable things today, 10 years down the road, it makes a huge difference. So
but nobody chose to do those in the past, Jim.
Well, I think we're in a special moment. I think it's like the locusts. Every 17 years, deficit reduction becomes a big issue, and we're in that 17-year cycle. And I think we're in a period where what's normally impossible can become possible. I mean, you just had a president put Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on the table, and you've got Tom Coburn, the most conservative Republican in the Senate, saying we need tax increases. So, right now, dogs and cats are living together.
All right, Jim. Thanks very much. Jim Kessler, co-founder, head of U.S. policy issues for the Democratic think tank Third Way.